Hello and welcome, or welcome back to Ensuring Success. We hope you've been with us all day, but if you're just joining us, we're so glad to have you here. We are live in Dallas at AMS Pictures, and I'm Gail Perry, Editor-in-Chief of CPA Practice Advisor magazine. Today we are here with some representatives from Xero who are going to talk about defining and achieving practice growth. Before we do that, I'd like to give a quick shout out to all of our sponsors who are making this event possible today, and that would include eFileForBiz.com, Intuit ProConnect, Peisner Johnson, Receipt Bank, Sage, Xero, Avalara, Boomer Consulting, Canopy, and CPA.com. For those of you just joining us, I want to explain real briefly how CPE works for this session. We will display 3 codes at the bottom of the screen. Each code is a 3-digit number. You need to write those numbers down. So altogether, there'll be 9 numbers, 9 digits for this session. At the end of the day, when you're ready, when you've finished all the sessions you're going to attend, you'll click the Get Your CE/CPE Credit option at the top of your screen, the same screen you're watching us on right now. And then you'll see a list of all the sessions for the day. And for each session you attended, you can just enter the CPE codes that you recorded for that session. And that's how you'll get your certificate. It'll come to you automatically then after you enter those codes. Also, you can reach us during the day. We're on Twitter at #DecemberCPE. We're on Facebook on the CPA Practice Advisors Facebook page, and we are also available through email at info@ensuringsuccess.com. Right now, I'd like to introduce our speakers. I'll just tell you their names and let them introduce themselves, and then we'll get into our session. So next to me, I have Tate Henshaw and then Ryan Watson. So please tell us a little bit about yourselves.
Thank you, Gail. It's a pleasure to be here. And my name's Tate Henshaw, and I work for a firm in Atlanta called Pulley Clark. Been there for about 10 years. We specialize in entertainers and athletes, so touring bands, producers, TV hosts, maybe Gail, at some point we can pick you up, and also professional athletes. And that, if that doesn't keep me busy enough, I've also, for the last year or so, been a Xero ambassador, where I just go around to events such as these and hopefully, help other advisors and accountants and bookkeepers realize the value of software like Xero.
Excellent.
My name is Ryan Watson, also happy to be here. I'm a co-founder and principal at a Columbus, Ohio-based management accounting practice called Upsourced Accounting. So I would say our clients are equally as cool as Tate's, but maybe not as flashy or has as much time on camera, but we specialize in primarily venture-backed tech startups as well as scaling creative agencies. And like Tate, I'm also a Xero ambassador and excited to dig in.
All right. Well, you guys both sound like you're with businesses that are in growth mode. So let's talk a little bit about what practice growth is and how you define it, and then we'll start talking about how other people define that as well.
Sure. So I'll
go
jump
ahead.
off
Yeah.
with that.
What's growth, Tate? I'm here to take notes. So you tell me, and then we'll.
Okay, I'll tell you. Just take this down, Ryan. So I define growth as positive change, and the reason I define it like that is it's easy to sort of romanticize growth and think, oh, it's this great thing. Whereas when you talk about change, a lot of people have a negative connotation with that. But the fact is, if you're growing, if you're adding clients, if you're adding services, if you're adding employees, that's change. So we need to think about it in that context. It's still a good thing, but we need to incorporate some change management techniques as well. So that's sort of
I love that. And funny, obviously, we were on a panel here talking about growth, so it's no surprise that there'd be a question about what is growth. Tate and I did not compare notes, but we have a very similar, I think, mindset. So how I would define growth is change, just like you, in the pursuit of something better, right? And so first of all, that can be something better. It can be personal, it can be professional, it can be, size of your firm, it can be cash flow, it can be any number of things, right? But again, I think I completely agree. Change is absolutely some piece of it. Stasis is kind of the opposite of growth. And then I think that the way that, I think we're saying the same thing in different ways, which is, I believe it's in the pursuit of something better. It doesn't necessarily mean the outcome is necessarily something better. In fact, I would say personally, some of the most meaningful growth in my career have come from trying things and failing kind of miserably at them.
Right.
But on the other side of failing kind of miserably at them, I've been better suited to tackle the next thing, and it's growth. It's not always linear, but it is always progress.
Right. I think, like you're saying, sometimes growth is a perception or a mindset, right? Because you can pull positives out of some adversity sometimes, things like that, like you're saying, when storms hit, per se. If you've got the right mindset, you can still come out of that with a growth mentality, I believe.
Well, yeah, and it's funny. So I mentioned that we service a lot of tech startups, and in the tech landscape, there's a meme, which some people have maybe seen or not seen. I'm trying to describe a meme, even though it's a picture. But
is
anyways,
that the first time meme has been mentioned
for
today? Or?
Yes, it is.
It is the first.
The
funny thing is, I actually probably could. I was wondering, what am I going to do with this pad of paper and this pen? I actually could draw it. In fact, but I'm not going to. But the meme goes something like this: what you think growth looks like, which is a sort of straight linear up and to the right. And then the other is what growth actually looks like. And it's just this big squiggly line that goes up and down and around, and then eventually ends up, exactly. You loop-de-doo, and that's the reality, right? That is, just because in the moment you don't feel like you're 2 steps forward every time doesn't mean that you're not growing. Growth is messy, it's chaotic,
Absolutely.
it's distracting, it's a lot of things. And to your point about mindset, it is, a successful growth endeavor, if you will, is reliant very heavily on having that acknowledgement and that mindset, because that's just part of it. Nobody has up and to the right linear growth. It's a fallacy. I've never met a single accounting firm, client, whatever it is, that has just steadily, repeatedly, predictably grown.
Absolutely.
Doesn't happen. It's not real.
A lot of times, a successful initiative, you only know that after.
Yeah, overnight success. 11 years in the making.
Right,
exactly.
right. Or you only, it's a happy ending if you know when to roll the credits, right?
That's right. That's right. Yeah, totally. Yeah, I agree.
So,
Well, I love the fact that you guys define growth as progress, whereas I think a standard answer would be a bigger bottom line, or more physical space, or something that's not really related to really a long-term situation that's going to just make your lives better.
absolutely.
Well, and I think the one thing, to your point about the more standard way to define growth is I've got a bigger firm and I've got more top line, but growth is in the context of what is that you're looking for in your business or your firm, and not everybody's looking for 8-figure, 9-figure accounting firm. Not everybody's looking to have 6 offices. Growth to some people looks like having more time to spend with their kids in the evenings and on weekends, and the path to growth for that goal looks a lot different than others, right? So growth can be defined in a lot of ways, and I think the first step is, what is it we're trying to do here?
Absolutely. Like the Simon Sinek, start with why.
Yeah.
Why do you want to grow?
Yeah.
And then you can start filling in the
Right.
what and the hows and all that stuff.
So if you're hoping or planning to achieve some growth in your business, where do you start in terms of? Well, I'll just leave it at that. Where do you start? You tell me.
Okay. Well, I think, just to reiterate the last thing we were trailing off on the previous point, start with why. Why do you want to grow? Because so many people just want growth for growth's sake, right? I guess that's a term you probably have heard that in the venture space.
Yep.
Just grow because you need to grow because you want to grow, and it's like, well, how does that make sense? To Ryan's previous point, I have 2 young children. He has a young child, so we may have totally different goals there than just we need more customers, right? Even that. Are you adding customers? Is that adding to the bottom line? Are you just churning, or how does that work?
Yeah, totally. And look, I completely agree with that as the basis, right? I think if I were to give make that more tactical and give an example of how we do that, how we start, it's very timely, given that we're as a firm doing this right now. So I was doing this on my plane right here, which is we have an annual exercise, which is our sort of strategy setting, and we follow a framework. popularized, I think, by Benioff and Salesforce, but I suspect they're probably not the only company that uses it. But anyways, the framework is V2 MOM. And so basically it's that V2 MOM stands for vision, values, methods, obstacles, and measures, right? So the first half, vision and values, is like, what do we, I mean, back to the start with why. What are we here for? Why do we exist as a firm? What is it we're trying to accomplish? And what are the things that are important to us in that pursuit? What are our values? What do we hold dear? And then next is, okay, well, what do we think achieving that vision in the context of those values looks like? What are the methods, the strategies? What are things going to stand in our way? And ultimately, what are the KPIs, the measures we're going to use to hold ourselves accountable? So that's just kind of, and there's a bunch. There's OGSM. It's another I've used before. Other, there's acronym soup all over the place. But the point is using a framework to start with why and progressively move more tactically to what am I going to do and how am I going to determine whether that's successful or not.
Yeah, and just to build off that, I think so many firms out there just want to go to if we're building off your acronym, go straight to the MOM section,
straight to MOM.
Methods and all that stuff.
Yeah.
And it's like they haven't even defined vision and values. And then they go into these, they start just doing things, right? And then they wonder why they don't achieve what they wanted to achieve, but they never really defined it. An example for us personally as a firm, we work with different marketing consultants and we're just sort of letting them run with it and obviously paying them money this whole time. And we never really defined what we wanted to get out of it. I mean, it would always be really sort of basic. We want more clients, or we want more, fees, or we want more of this. We want to do more services. But the fact is, we never brought that back to the vision of the firm and the vision that all the employees signed up to follow. And, no surprise, a lot of those initiatives didn't work out because they didn't align with our vision and our values.
Yeah, it's funny, as you're talking, I am having like all this deja vu with just like, man, I've had this conversation a lot, which is with our own clients, right? So if I take this and we're both, we work with clients in a sort of outsourced controller CFO capacity. And so again, most of our clients think of us as how can you help me with the sort of MOM component, particularly the last M, the measures, right? And I would say I spent a disproportionate percentage of my time saying, great, but before we can start with this M, can we go up to the V2 part of this? Has anybody asked themselves, what is it we're trying to accomplish? What are our goals? Why do you exist? We actually start as a firm. Every new client that we take on, we have a quote unquote strategy session. It's kind of an all day thing where all we do really is we talk about the V2 section. We ask a lot of questions to suss that out, because if we don't, and when I say we, I mean our firm, but I mean the stakeholders of our client as well. If we don't all really understand that at a very molecular level, then all the other stuff we do is just going to be a total waste. And in the end, we're not going to be very effective for our clients because they're not going to achieve whatever growth objective they have, because we're just, as you said, we're just trying tactics because that's what's been done and that's what we think we need to do. And we can measure their kind of effectiveness, but we can't really measure them against what the vision is, right?
Absolutely. Just like for us, if a band loves being on the road and loves grinding, that's a totally different methods and measures versus a band that really wants to stay home. They want to, maybe monetize via YouTube, or there's so many different options out there, and it applies just the same for firms.
Agreed.
All right, we're going to take a quick break here, and we want to tell you a little bit about Xero with a commercial break from Xero, and then we'll be right back with your first CPE code for this session.
As an accountant, I joined Xero for their practice management tools. Xero just makes my workflow easier. So I have time to catch any issues before they have an impact on my clients, like Luke. Make building your accounting business easy. Join Xero.
That was a quick break. So we now are displaying your first CPE code on the screen. It's on the bottom of the screen, 3-digit number. Be sure to write this down. This is how you'll get CPE credit for this session. We also have some polling opportunities. These are not part of the requirement for CPE, just general information we'd like to ask. So our polling software is Slido.com. It's SLIDO.com. And we recommend, if you're going to participate in the polls, use an auxiliary device so that you're not taking yourself away from the screen where you're watching our session. But if you go to Slido.com, the entry code to get into our polls is hashtag December CPE. The hashtag's already there. Just type December CPE and that'll take you in. And our first question that we've posted for this session is, how do you define growth in your firm? So we'd greatly appreciate having some answers there, and then we'll come back and check in a little bit and see what kind of responses we got. Meanwhile, let's get back to talking about growth. And where do you start in terms of, let's say you've reached your vision, and you're working out a plan. How do you engage the rest of the members of your company, or your firm, and your family in the plans that you're making towards growth?
Great question.
Yeah, so I'd say a couple of things that are going to be kind of obvious, and then Tate can follow up with some things that are going to be more novel. But so I would say a couple of easy ones, right? First of all, communicate. 80%. If we go back to growth is change, nothing is worse than being a person contributing to or next to change and having no idea what's going on, right? So number one is just communicating effectively. But I would say number two is maybe taking that a step further. It's enrolling, right? So it's if you have a growth objective, let me take it from a personal perspective. Maybe one of the largest growth objective that I've had professionally was the decision to start this firm itself, right? So formerly I worked for a large consulting firm in DC. We had started the firm as kind of a nights and weekends project, but we had decided, we are going to invest our time, our resources, and our money to focusing on our own firm full time. And part of that involved personally moving from DC back to Columbus, Ohio, where we founded the firm, where the other partners are. And that involved, of course, a big professional leap for myself, but also my wife had a job in DC. She's got to come to Columbus. Neither of us have any place to live in Columbus at the moment, right? And so had I come home and said, hey, I've got this wonderful idea and I've signed us both up for it, I'm not sure that would have been a very successful strategy, and I don't know if we would still be married. Right? So it's enrolling, right? We're in this together. Again, I think the point is whether you think you're doing something, regardless of what you're doing, you're not doing it alone. There is no growth objective, or there's no method, if we go back to the V2 Mom, that you can do in a vacuum without having other people affected, whether they're directly contributing or they're just passively, again, being affected. And so enrolling them along the way. And then the last thing I would say is enrolling is not a kind of one and done sort of thing. So along the way, it's being present and checking in. So again, if that's from a personal perspective, that's saying, hey, look, if I'm growing, I might be devoting more of my time to the whatever the thing is, growing the firm in this case, which might mean I spend a little bit less time at home. But when I'm home, I've got to be present. I've got to use that time, and I've got to take stock and check in about, hey, this is the plan we set from a growth perspective. We kind of agreed as a family this is how it would go. How are we doing? How am I doing? What needs to change? Nothing. No plan is ever static, and so again, that's kind of a personal example, but it's the same for employees, right? It's enrolling employees in the change, and being present with them as they are grappling with the change, and checking in with them on how their jobs have changed, their roles have changed, their own visions have changed, their responsibilities, those sorts of things. So I would say those three things.
I think communicate. For sure, just to build off what you said.
3 things.
Yeah.
We each have a list of 3. Yeah. We said communicate for them. Yeah.
Just to give a couple more examples, just to build off of that, I'm just adding on the CFP currently, and so just like Ryan's saying, I'm talking to my family because that's outside of my normal obligations, which are fairly significant to start with, and so just talking about, what's the long-term goal, not just the short-term sacrifice. Right, because we're looking toward that long-term goal. And then with employees, so we went through the great cloud migration, or whatever you want to call it, from like 2015, 2016. And the thing with communicating, you got to tie it back to them personally, not just, well, the company's going to be better because of this reason. Well, they don't own the company, and it'd be great if everybody acted like an owner, but we live in reality, and that's sometimes not the case. So we were doing that and saying, this is going to be easier, this is going to be better for you workflow-wise, this and that. And sort of hit and miss, honestly. But here's what happened is, so we're in Atlanta. Traffic is not great, right? It's pretty terrible.
It's terrible.
And lo and behold, when we communicated out that when we get totally cloud-based, all of a sudden it's going to enable all the employees to be able to work from home. The buy-in skyrocketed.
That's right. Yeah.
Why? Because that ties into them personally. And it's giving them more time with their families. It's taking their road rage level down, right?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, so similar example, different initiative from our perspective, but one of the things that we really focused on a lot this year was, as every small firm grows, most small firms start with a collection of generalists. Those collection of generalists do all the things for a particular client. They're onboarding their clients, they're having the monthly meeting with their clients, they're doing the account reconciliation with their clients, they're preparing the tax return, they're doing all the things.
Very horizontal.
It's very horizontally integrated, and that's wonderful, right? I mean, you get a broad array of experiences, and I think that's been helpful for a lot of our team. However, as you start to grow, the diminishing marginal returns on that horizontal horizontal integration, and you start to need specialists, right? And so we underwent a process of creating a different org structure that had some specialists. And first again, it's communicating what we're doing, why we're doing it, but secondly, it's enrolling each person individually in A, why we're doing it, but B, hey, look, you help us drive, first, you're on the ground, right? So you help us determine what is the most efficient way for us to service the clients. You're servicing the clients more directly than we are in many cases. And secondarily, this is kind of the broad framework, but help us drive where you fit into this framework, right? This isn't a top-down, this is your new job now. It's, hey, look, we're building this firm together. As much as you can, as much as it is we're in this together, enrolling them, the more successful both parties are going to be, and at least more aligned both parties are going to be on the other side.
Yeah, and I love, so we've gone through a lot of change and growth and everything in between over the last couple years, and whenever, a new initiative comes along or a gap comes personnel-wise, I love to, talk to people and say, look, we've got opportunities. Where do you see yourself going?
Yeah.
Versus, us stipulating, here's the structure, here's all the pieces that fit in. We've got a reporting specialist, a CFO, a tax specialist, whatever it may be.
Yeah.
If there's multiple opportunities, talk to your staff and say, hey, where do you see your career going? Where would you like to
That's right.
expand? And also it gives you an opportunity to communicate to them and say, hey, I've seen you really excel in this area.
That's right.
Can we foresee, better overall firm operations if you're able to start specializing there. That's a whole different conversation than, hey, we're changing everything. This is your new title.
Yep.
And then it's like, why? Because as humans, we sort of assume the worst, and a lot of times they're assuming, oh, well, did I do bad at the other stuff?
Yeah.
But really, it's not that. It's that you're good at.
That's right, totally. And not to go down a staffing or career pathing rabbit hole, but I do think a really important part, because if we zoom out and say, hey, look, part of growth is enrolling your team, and part of growth is helping them be part of the solution. I can hear other small firms on the other end of this hear that and say, that's all well and good, but we're relatively small, and we don't have, we're not Deloitte or EY, where we can offer you a menu of functions and verticals that you can just pick and choose your way through. We have 12 people. I can't make you a manager of yourself. I have limitations. And I would say we deal with that as well. That's absolutely a challenge, but it doesn't mean that you can't, just because you can't create, incremental hierarchies that don't exist doesn't mean you can't be creative in meeting the needs of the growth that your individual employees want to do. So one example of that is, we don't necessarily have fully dedicated roles to certain things in the firm that need to get done. What we have created is this idea of SMEs, or subject matter experts, right? So look, your day job, your primary responsibility is X. However, you have a passion area in this thing, whether it's a piece of technology, right? You want to be I'll use Receipt Bank. That's a tool we use in our firm. If you want to be the Receipt Bank SME at our firm and work with our clients in implementing, training, educating, and those sorts of things, this is an opportunity for you to get those skills while still, allowing the firm to get the work done that it needs to get done, right? So smaller firms, just the incumbency is on us to think a little bit more outside the box on how do we create those. But it's definitely doable, right? It's definitely doable.
And I think, just because you're small now doesn't mean you shouldn't think as if you're going to grow.
That's right.
Because that's the whole thing we're talking about, preparing for the growth.
That's right.
And if you think you're never going to grow, then
that's right.
It's sort of a self-fulfilling prophecy, right? So start thinking about what those roles could be. I was listening to a podcast of a church, and they had a single campus and just a few people, but they laid out the org structure for when they were going to have hundreds of people.
Yeah.
And so to your point, what they did was they put, not only did they have the full org structure for when it was at fruition, and this reminds me of the E-Myth as well, that was a similar thing was mentioned, but they also took the people who were there and they put their names on every single position. So then you're getting into that sort of SME thing, but you're also planning ahead for growth. So
I love it.
All right, we're going to take another break real quickly to hear a little bit more about Xero. We're going to, after that, display the second CPE code, and then we'll go over some of the responses we got from our audience as to how they define growth. So we'll be back in just a minute.
The Partner Program gives you the tools and knowledge to make your practice better. Things like practice software that seamlessly integrates with Xero. You have your own dedicated account manager. We provide marketing support to help you grow your practice. A discount on each client Xero subscription. And the more engaged you are with Xero, the more you get from the Partner Program. And we're here to help. We offer educational support at no cost to help you and your clients. Xero U is our investment in teaching you everything you need to know on your Xero journey. It's not just about the software, it's about teaching you how to be successful in your job using Xero as a tool. Xero TV provides beautiful video for you and your clients to consume bite-sized education. And we have enablement services to help you convert your clients to Xero. With Xero, you can run a beautifully efficient practice with everything you and your clients need in the cloud. Your practice, your clients, one powerful accounting software platform.
Welcome back. If you look at the bottom of your screen, you should see our second CPE code for this session. So be sure to write that down if you plan to collect CPE credit at the end of the day today. And I'd like to go through some of the responses we got from our first polling question, which was how do you define growth in your own firm? And we had some really interesting questions here. Somebody who said they define growth as being able to develop staff better, curating their culture. We have someone who defines growth as bringing on new technology, bringing in new clients, increased offerings to clients, increasing revenue without increasing number of clients by providing more services, automation for daily tasks, making my clients' overall situation better through open communication and adequate planning, and improving quality of service shows up several times, which is really kind of nice to see. So it's a variety of things. I think the goal of the question was not so much to teach us about how growth should be defined, but to have you reflect a little bit on what you think growth would be in your situation if you were to implement a growth plan. So, and getting back to our topic then, and actually before I do it, I want to jump in and just make one comment because I've heard some questions coming in through our question section in Slido that there's an option on your screen to hit pause, which some people are doing, and then they come back and they expect to pick up where they left off. You can't do that. We can't offer that pause feature and then also offer CPE credit because you have to be able to watch the whole thing live. So if you hit pause, you may miss a CPE code. So we don't recommend you hit pause. If you have to run out of the room, just run out and run right back, but keep the broadcast going. Don't try to stop it because you'll end up skipping some of the broadcast. Okay, so let's get back to our discussion about growth. And Let's talk a little bit about the challenges or obstacles you can meet when you're trying to grow in however you define growth, and what you can, when you don't even know what those obstacles are going to be till you get there, how can you kind of anticipate and work through them?
For sure. So I would say all of the challenges, anything you can imagine is probably going to rear its ugly head at some point. For us, all the things we've been talking about, staff pushback, client pushback, firm leadership disagreements, all those things can happen. I know if we're talking about adding new technology, I've never seen one that is exactly the way you think it is when you see the sales pitch, and it's not necessarily because of the technology, it's because each firm is different and the way it gets implemented is different. Every new technology that we've added, there's been obstacles. There's been things we didn't realize, because some things you just can't realize until you're in the middle of it, right? So I think the first thing is just knowing that is going to happen. I think so many people, they either squash their timeline down so tight to where they can't afford any obstacles. For one, don't do that. The obstacles are going to come up, so give yourself extra time, extra budget, extra communication, run some pilots. Don't just do what we've done at different points and say, oh, we're going to roll this out for every client tomorrow, and then you run into a real obstacle, and instead of a small problem that you can probably control and like a campfire, you've got a forest fire at this point.
Yeah, look, I mean, I totally agree, all the challenges. B, I also agree, running, so if we go back to the idea of, boy, I'm really giving Salesforce a heck of a shout out today. Me too, Mom. I like to say something and then use it as a through line. So if we use that as a through line, if I go back to like the mom section, right? So ideally speaking, that the way to think about methods and obstacles and then measures are like experiments, right? So so to your point of run a pilot, ultimately every I would say we have it's actually not our saying, it's a very popular saying. We adhere to a saying which is strong beliefs loosely held, right? And so we have an approach, right? We believe this is the tactic or the method that we think is the right way to achieve our vision, alongside our values. And so we will go after them and structure it like an experiment or like a pilot. And we will, we'll time box it, we'll determine what does success look like, and ideally then we'll evaluate, the result of that. Now I'll say, one of the things that's really challenging, so where I was gonna go with the answer to this question originally was, what's really challenging about that is, it's never really a bright, it's hard, there are very few bright lines in a growth strategy around like this is working or this isn't. It's never incredibly clear. So when I would answer the question, what are the obstacles or challenges, I would say some of the biggest are doubt and distraction, right? So, if we think about that, like what does growth actually look like? It looks like this curlicue and up and down and all around. And as you're in the middle of that, it is really, really, really hard to know, am I on the right or wrong path?
Yeah.
It's really hard. And I'll tell you what makes it particularly hard is it's the rubric that as accountants we're used to using to evaluate, is this right or is this wrong? So if I go to the traditional work that we're doing, like if I'm preparing a tax return or I want to take a tax position for a particular client, I usually use like a 95% confidence interval to say, this is probably right. If I'm, if we're having them apply some gap guidance, I'm using a confidence interval around 95% to say this is probably the right way to recognize revenue given the facts and circumstances. If I'm on a growth trajectory and we're whatever that looks like, if I'm trying to grow a new service offering or I'm trying to move into a different vertical of client or whatever that is, you are never going to get 95% confidence that you are on the right path.
No,
It's not possible. I'm
never.
not kidding. I'm working between 45 and 55% at any given time.
Yeah.
And 55 is really good. It's really good. But I'll tell you, 55 for most accountants feels really bad. It feels like I'm wrong. And so if you allow doubt to creep in and you allow that 55 to say, oh no, we're on the wrong path, then you get distracted. You start moving back. You're jerking around from this strategy to this strategy. You never really try anything out. And so to some degree, to combat that is A, like resetting your expectation, your mindset, and to some degree relying on intuition, right?
Yeah.
Intuition is going to drive you to say 55, that's probably right.
Yeah.
And our traditional sort of logic-based method for is this right or wrong would say, no, abandon,
Yeah,
right? And so, and
exactly.
that's, I'm not gonna, I can say that here, I can say this is how to do it, and tomorrow I'm gonna go home and I'm gonna be faced with a situation where I'm only 55% confident, and I'm gonna feel a very strong urge to cut bait and move on. It is the hardest thing to learn.
Right.
Particularly as accountants, because we're so like logic oriented, but just for anybody to combat the doubt and distraction that plagues every growth objective.
Right. Yeah. Just to reiterate, communicate.
Yeah.
Communicate.
Yeah.
Right. Because let's just use another example of rolling a new technology out, because it's sort of easy for a lot of the viewers to get their head around, I think. So you add a new technology because you want to save your people time.
Yeah.
I think. I mean, maybe you want to add a new service offering, but in general, you're trying to get more efficient, and that was a lot of the answers from the poll, which is great. But every time you add a new one, then you've got this learning curve as well. So most likely, it's going to take you more time at the beginning. So if you're talking about numbers and percentages and efficiency, time saved, and all that great stuff, I mean, it's going to be very hard for you to know. And each one, you can't just say, well, the learning curve for a new technology is X number of weeks. For a different technology, it could be totally different.
Exactly.
And so, like you're saying, it's very scary, and it's very much, it's not a balance sheet and a P&L where we can say that, these things tie
This is
out
right,
and this
this is
matches
wrong.
up. This goes here. It's,
Tick it and tie it and put it away. We're gonna move on to our next thing. I wish.
So I
wish so much that it could.
You just got that intuition and the communication. Talk to your team, like you mentioned earlier. They're the ones they're on the ground. A lot of times we're sort of watching it and saying, well, why is this time ballooning out of control? And this technology is supposed to work like this because the salesman told me it was going to work like that.
Yeah.
Whereas when you get in with your staff, maybe it's the integration with something else.
Yeah.
Maybe it's you need to change your process
Yep.
to match the way the new technology works. So I think, just keeping that open line of communication, it's not just on the front end when you tell them this is what the end goal looks like, this is how it benefits you. All the way through the whole process, you've got to keep that open line of communication.
I totally agreed, and the only other thing I would add on to that, which is again to make the along the communication route and to make the using intuition feel more comfortable for accountants and anybody is again going back to the mom part of it, structure the thing as much as you can, like have the thought up front. So I'm going to adopt a new piece of technology. Okay, so the method is this, right? I want to save some staff time. That's the goal. And so the method is I'm going to adopt this piece of workflow technology. Great. Let's be honest about the obstacles. So what will we struggle with as we look to do this? And be honest with a gut check. Okay, what are the measures, right? How long is it going to take me? Do I think? What do I hope to see at the end of this, et cetera? And then even though, as we both acknowledged, it's not going to happen that way. You're likely not to see the measures in the same timeline in the same way. It at least gives you a framework to say, okay, I'm not seeing the results. Why? Is the answer because it's not succeeding, or are there other factors? Did I miss an obstacle? Like this is a thing that was in our path. I didn't see it, but now I know it, and it set us back. And even though that gives me more confidence to say it's not the solution that failed, it's the obstacle I didn't foresee that changes my plan in this way. And it gives us a little bit of a safety net to at least think through this really murky, really hard to predict path and give us a way to kind of, as best we can, evaluate it somewhat logically along the way. So it's a safety net.
Yeah, and I think one other thing is when we communicate, don't just make it internal as well. A lot of us, we get in our silo, and for me, like our Pole Clark silo, no one else has ever had this problem. You know, what are we doing wrong?
Yeah.
You know, if you're in some of these social media groups or go to some in-person, meetings, things like that, meetups, whatever it may be, a lot of times if you bring that up, other practitioners are going to be like, oh yeah, I ran into the exact same thing.
Totally.
I mean, I'm going to go to Ryan and be like, dude, this thing is not working. You told me it was going to work. Oh, and he can probably solve my problem so much quicker.
Or put your mind at ease to say that, exactly. Yeah, we have the same thing. It takes X and Y. It'll take a little time, whatever it is, right? But yeah, totally. And it's a great point. There's nothing new under the sun. None of the problems that we're facing are unique to our firm. Somebody else has had some version of that. And so reaching out to a community and whatever that looks like. Again, as you mentioned, there's Facebook groups that we use. I have like private Slack for those of you that use Slack. I've got private Slack with other folks in the industry that I've just met along the way, and it's just kind of the brain trust of people I can just Slack and say, I'm trying to solve X. Accelerate my learning curve for me, right?
Please, yeah.
All right, we're going to do one more quick break. Just another brief bit of information about our sponsor, Xero, and then we'll be back with your third CPE code for this session. So we'll be right back.
As an accountant, I joined Xero because it makes collaborating easy with clients like Penny and with the Xero team like Shelly. Want your accounting business to work a little smoother? Join Xero.
Spicy, right?
It's got that kick.
And we are back. We would like to have you take note of the CPE code that is appearing on the bottom of your screen. This is your third 3-digit code for this session, so be sure to keep that with the other two if you're going to get CPE credit for this session later. Also, we've posted another polling question up in Slido if you would like to join in that conversation. It's slido.com, SLIDO.com, and then you need the code December CPE to get into our session. And we have a question that we've posted, which is, what obstacles do you think stand in the way of your firm's growth? And again, this is a question we're hoping that you'll use to reflect on as you're thinking through where you would like to go or where you see yourself in the future and what you think might be standing in the way. And then also, I'd like to ask our members here for some, we've mentioned measurement a couple times, but some general tips, and I know it's hard to have an overall measurement program when everybody's definition of growth is going to be different, but in general, how can people set up a program to measure their progress along the way so they know they're actually getting closer to that goal?
Keep that one.
Yeah, good question. Well, I mean, as you mentioned, it's highly dependent on what are the goals. But I can say, I mean, simply it's working. I mean, how would I answer this question? So it's working backwards from what ultimately we're trying to accomplish, right? So, for instance, if I were to throw out an example, let's say I want to accomplish, I want to grow revenue, and part of the method is I want to enter a new vertical, right? So we do tech startups and creative agencies. I want to start doing e-commerce retail companies, right? And so let's say that's one of my big growth methods for 2020 or 2019 or whatever's coming up, 2019. So that's my big growth lever for 2019. Okay, great. So then I've got some of the methods for how we're going to do that. Okay, well, it's just introspective. What does success look like, right? And that might look like, I would kind of break the thing down into its component parts. So one might be acquisition of clients, right? So what are the measures around how many of these clients am I getting in front of, how many conversations I'm having with e-commerce clients, how many of them are resulting in an actual meeting, how many of them are converting, right? So I might have that, and then secondarily I'll say, okay, great, I've got some metrics around my ability to get these folks in the top of the funnel. The next might be, what is my success rate with delivering great work? and that success rate with delivering great work might be measured in a variety of ways. It might be measured in retention over the year. It might be measured in Net Promoter Score. So for those of you that are not using Net Promoter Score as a way to measure client success, here's a good tip. Use Net Promoter Score to measure your client satisfaction. There's a variety of wonderful tools, but basically Net Promoter Score is a way of, it's a question you ask to your clients, which basically says, would you refer me to a friend? And it's kind of the sort of net of the people who would sort of vehemently refer you minus the people who wouldn't, right? And so how much into the black are you? But the point is, as I'm walking through that example, it's really just sort of stepping back and saying, what are the tactics that we think we have to do, and how can I measure that? How can I make that a measurable thing? And what is the one thing I will say is, as part of a V2 Mom exercise or whatever it is, putting those metrics down, writing them down, and having an ongoing cadence where we look at them. That is like the number one thing that we have failed with in the past and that our clients continually fail with. We have this wonderful measurement exercise. We write down all these wonderful KPIs that we're going to follow, and then nobody ever looks at them ever again. They just become irrelevant. And so as a company, we have a quarterly exercise where we pull up, here are the metrics we said by whatever measure it was. How are we doing? Sometimes we get through the year and we say, you know what, that metric isn't relevant anymore. That's okay. Nothing is static. But whatever you do, just creating some hygiene around having some repetition around it. That's what I would say.
Absolutely. I mean, when we were talking about obstacles, I sort of cautioned against making your timeline too short or being too static with your goals and stuff like that. That doesn't mean you don't still have them. And to Ryan's point, just get a whiteboard out.
Yeah.
And say, okay, put at the bottom the end goal, right? And if you don't know what that is, you need to stop and go back and figure that out.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, start with why.
Don't ever skimp on the vision and
100%.
Values part.
Yep.
If that takes you, however long it takes you, it doesn't matter. You've got to do that. But then, once you figure that end goal out, I think you'll be surprised how quickly you can figure out the steps to get to that. And once you figure out the steps, I think you'd be surprised how straightforward it is to put some metrics around that, whether it be timing or KPIs or whatever it is. I think when you think about a big initiative or something as a whole, it can be very daunting to think about, how am I going to track this? How am I going to measure it? Whatever. But figure that end goal out, very systematically, map out the steps for that. And then when you think about measuring those individual steps, all of a sudden you realize, oh, this isn't as daunting as I thought it was. Break it down.
Yeah, and the one thing, and this actually, it kind of reminds me of like a framework that we use when we're talking to our own clients about their own KPI setting. And so I'd say when I think about KPIs or measures, I sort of break them into kind of two pieces. One is operational metrics. These are the things that I can physically control and I can affect. The other being kind of financial metrics, right? This is the result, right? This is the P&L. Did I grow 10%? That's the financial metric. The way in which I get to 10% growth are all the operational metrics. And I say that to say, I use an analogy about how I should treat operational and financial metrics in thinking about weight loss, right? So if I have decided I want to lose some weight, the sort of financial metric of weight is how much I weigh, standing on a scale. In order to lose weight, I don't just like stand on a scale and then stand on a scale again and then stand on a scale again and say, boy, I really want that number to go down. It doesn't work that way, right?
I thought that was
well, no, I mean,
supposed to do it.
If you're having success with that, we should talk afterwards. But it doesn't work for me. So then that is as silly as saying I want to grow 10% and then just tracking that metric and praying and wishing and hoping that changes and really focusing there.
And getting upset when you don't hit it.
When it doesn't happen.
Dang, I didn't hit that.
In fact, throw that away, right? That's a helpful thing. It's decide on it, whatever, and then what are the operational metrics? So back into my example, it might look like filling the funnel, it might look like converting them, and it might look like making them really happy. Focus over here. As long as you're doing these things well, eventually, on whatever timeline, this will happen. And so that's the other sort of advice I would say. Decide what are the inputs and focus there, and just ignore you're going to get distracted around revenue-based targets. That's the report card, but it's not those aren't the levers.
I would add one thing to that too. When you say that eventually this will happen.
Yeah.
Sorry, you're in the trick chair.
Yeah.
Sometimes eventually this will change too.
Agreed.
As you go down that path and realize what you're getting yourself into, basically.
That's 100%. Yeah, that's 100% right. That's 100% right. And again, it may change. It may not happen on the same space. So again, if the goal is, I want to enter a new vertical, and my strategy is I want to try 3 different verticals, and I might have, I might add 5 different clients of a variety of verticals throughout the year, and I might get to the end of the year and say, this one of these 3 verticals is not working out. And you know what? The clients that I've added there are a distraction. We're not delivering great service. And you know what? We probably should fire the clients. We probably should let them go. If my focus was on the 10% growth, or I was just married to that as being the result, I might be reluctant to make what is the right decision, which is moving my number backwards, but accomplishing the actual inputs, the long term. Yeah, exactly. So
goals. Yeah.
Yep, that's right.
All right. I think that pretty much does it for us. We really want to thank both of you for participating in our session today. We really want to thank Xero for sponsoring this session. And we have a directive for those of you who are watching and who plan to continue with us into the next session or later on today, which I assume is everybody, because who wouldn't want to continue and get more great education and training today. So the directive is we would like all of you to refresh your screens. And we're going to have a break here between sessions. It's the perfect time. We just need to have everybody do a quick refresh, and you'll be right back, and we'll move forward from there. And we will see you back at the top of the hour. And our session at the top of the hour is pain points found in prep, comp, and review services. So you're not going to want to miss that. Refresh your screen, and we'll see you back at the top of the hour. Thank you.
Thanks.